Good. Well, it's a great privilege for me to welcome someone who's a real teacher now, and who's also part of the course here this weekend. David Allard, who's at the Rawlins Community College in Corn in Lancashire, and sorry, Leicestershire. How did I get the wrong L there? My sincere apologies. And who earlier on was in astrophysics from the University of Leicester, and he's currently head of science there at the Rawlins Community College. And David has been involved in this new course, which I just learned has the acronym POS, Perspectives on Science, and which I've been hearing quite a bit about the past couple of years, including a conference up at Rugby School where I was speaking, and where John Taylor was there, who's one of the early, I think, developers of this course. And I just sat there with some of the presentations of the course and thought, what a fantastic course, and I just wished that had been around when I was a student, actually. So I look forward, as I'm sure you do, to hearing more about it from David Allard. Thanks so much, David.
Well, I was teaching on Friday, yesterday, to a sixth form group, physics group, and they were asking me about this weekend and what I was going to be doing. And they asked me actually in the end to go to the website and show them what the institute was about and the kind of stuff that would be talked about. So I put up the course on the big screen and had the list of speakers there and the content, and they started laughing as they looked at the list of speakers. And I said, what's the problem? What's funny? Well, look, sir, they said, they're all clever. So what do you mean? Well, look, he's a professor, he's a doctor and a reverend, and you're a mister. Well, I suppose they have a point. So I am the science teacher from the comp, and happy to be so. The reason I'm doing these two sessions actually is to talk a bit about what happens on the ground, I suppose. Not just to deliver to you guys, but I'm really hoping to leave this weekend having got some ideas back as well. And there'll be plenty of opportunity to share ideas, share hopefully some good practice as we go through. So I'm doing two sessions. The session today is on this course, Perspectives on Science, which is down in your notes as a new venture in history, philosophy and ethics of science. That title is slightly misleading in that it's neither new, being 10 years old or so, nor is it strictly speaking a venture. It no longer exists as a qualification. It does exist as a programme of study within something called the Extended Project. And so today I'm going to be talking about this course, how you might deliver it if you want to, or if you're not in the sciences, how you might borrow some of its key activities, some of its key philosophies, and apply them in the classroom yourself. It's aimed really at post-16 students, but certainly our better sort of 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds can certainly access some of the activities that are going on. We will also be doing some of these activities together today, so this is not going to be a deep philosophical lecture. This is going to be a bit hands-on. The ideas will probably not be new to many of you, but I'm hoping the exercises will be helpful. Tomorrow, we're going to study, or spend a bit more time thinking in particular about how to get philosophical and ethical aspects into a classroom. So more general techniques for getting students talking and thinking. So, perspectives on science. What is it? Well, it's that. Aspects of philosophy, ethics, history in the context of scientific knowledge and progress. There's clearly this idea we've been thinking about this weekend that you have science where you do your facts, and you do your observations, your experiments, and then you have your philosophy where you do your thinking, or your ethics where you work out what's right and wrong, and these are all kind of separated off. And we all know that in reality, and in the history of science, that was never the case. That science is a human endeavour conducted by humans with their biases, with their politics, with their own issues, and their own drives. Originally it was standalone AS qualifications, now absorbed into Extended Project. By the way, is anyone here delivering or has delivered Extended Project or the projects level 1 and 2? Hopefully more will by the end of this session. Brief history of the course. So it was about 10 years ago, it wasn't 10 years ago, when John Taylor, who studied philosophy and physics at Oxford, I think he taught philosophy at Oxford for a while. He's now at Rugby School, started as head of physics, and he's now the head of critical thinking there. He was bashing a few ideas around with some colleagues over a cup of coffee, and it was at the time when Curriculum 2000 was coming out, the idea of splitting A-levels into their two constituents. And these chaps thought, wouldn't it be great if there was some sort of introductory course into the philosophy and ethics of science? And John, if you met him, was not a chap to let a good idea go. So he hurried away at it, got the exam boards involved, got support from the Royal Society, from Wellcome Trust, from PPAR, as it was. And by 2004, there was a qualification in Perspectives on Science, the philosophy of science. It was essentially a dissertation. Students chose a topic, they researched it, they presented it, and they were marked completely internally on that. Now, white paper in 2006, the government suggesting, I think quite rightly, that students at A-level should be doing some sort of individual research project. And Excel again took up the baton on this one, and Perspectives was such an obvious candidate for this that it formed the foundation for the extended project. Now the extended project is now much, much broader. It's not just science at all, and you don't just have to do a dissertation. There are various different ways of doing an extended project I'll talk about in a moment or two. But as I say, Perspectives was so closely related to this new proposed project that it was absorbed into it, and John Taylor in fact became chief examiner on the extended project. I now work with him. 2004, by the way, was when I got involved. My then head of department at my previous school, a lady with a lot of vision, who was an ardent atheist and had some very interesting conversations from time to time. She heard from John about this new qualification, asked if I'd like to get involved, and we ran it for a good few years with a lot of success. Students loved it, and the teachers loved it too. When I moved, I brought it to my new school. As I say, it's now the extended project, and today it's growing very fast indeed. From a small number of centres a couple of years ago, we had over 100 last year, and we're projecting about 3 times that at least this year. That's within Excel. AQA and OCR have now joined in as well, and because I've seen the success of it and the way the universities look at it, and so it has grown very, very fast. I think that may have consequences. You'll know as well as I do, it's always the case when a qualification becomes more popular and the exam boards start to fight for candidates, that there's always a danger that standards can be affected. I hope that won't happen, but I do know that QCA are already asking questions about that sort of thing. So that's the history of the course. I'll let you have a quick look through that. That's the official what is an extended project. Is that big enough to see at the back? So, in essence, the project is one of those 4. Where POS was and is a dissertation. You could do a field study, do some primary research and write that up. You could do a performance, a song or a play or whatever, or an artifact, which I think is defined as anything that isn't the other 3. That could be from a sculpture to a painting to a website, something you can perhaps manipulate or pick up, I don't know. The point being, of course, is that all learners now can access that. You don't just have to write an extended essay, you could do a number of different ways through. But all of them are assessed in the same 4 ways. Now this is what makes it stand out, what I like about the extended projects. Most project work focuses on this bit here, developing and realising the final product, the essay, the performance, the picture, the sculpture, whatever. What the extended project does is it assesses the students on all these 4 areas. So although the biggest area is here, it's still less than half the marks. We've got 25%ish of the marks up there, a bit less than that. Their ability to select, critically evaluate and synthesise their resources into a coherent narrative, to back it up with their criticism of the sources themselves, with a decent bibliography. Skills that they'll take on to higher education should they go that way. They get a significant number of marks for actually managing, putting a proposal together, timing their activities well, making sure they meet their deadlines, keeping an activity log. And again, significant mark for evaluating not just the project itself, but their own learning experience, how they developed as learners as they've gone through that. So a much more rounded project. And a lot of centres when we first delivered this fell down because they produced brilliant artefacts, brilliant performances, but kind of neglected these 3 because we're not used to, as teachers, to delivering that to that kind of level. At the same time though, I think that makes this project a really useful one to do. It does develop and produce much more rounded learners. And again, this is straight from specification, but you can see this, it's ticking a lot of boxes there, isn't it? It's the kind of things that certainly universities want to see from students. And I think cross-curricularly as well, I've certainly found it's a really useful exercise for the students to do. I find it more valuable for the skills it gives the learners and the actual UCAS points it gives them. The EP is still worth the same as an AS level in terms of UCAS points. So why POS in particular? It's going to keep on saying extended project in the corner, by the way. That's because I adapted this from an Excel PowerPoint, and I can't get rid of those words at the top there. So ignore that. I'm now talking about Perspective on Science as a particular way of delivering an extended project. So the basis of science. A good structural base. The students I deliver this to are mostly higher ability ones. They're in the sciences and they're looking to go to universities to do the higher science, sorry, the further sciences, or to do medicine, veterinary science, stuff like that. When they get there, they will no doubt be asked questions about their ethical positions. Well, a student who's done Perspectives on Science or a similar kind of course is going to be in a much stronger position to do that because they've researched it themselves and they've researched the topic they wanted to research. The reconnection of arts and science, we've thought a lot about how science and religion are seen as now separate blocks that can't meet by a lot of people in society. Well, I think arts and science has sometimes been seen the same sort of way. You do your factual stuff, that's the science, you do your creative stuff, that's the arts, and there's no kind of connection whatsoever. But what students do by doing this course is realise just, again, how much science is a human endeavour. And transferable skills. That's a page from the textbook. Which is this. I'll leave this around later on if I have a quick browse through it. There's lots of stuff in here which supports, let's say, the direct teaching of this particular model. Combats extremes of black and white thinking. Students, I guess we all don't, we learn as we go through life, we absorb other people's opinions, those of our parents, those of our friends, those of our society, and we have very fixed views as we get into school. And then takes a while to break those views down. And you'll know if you teach sixth formers, in particular at the beginning of sixth form, how very black and white and how very right-wing a student's views can be. And it can take a lot of work to get them to question their own points of view, their own beliefs. At the same time, there is still that push in some areas towards postmodernist or relativist thinking. I'll give you one great example of this, which I showed my students. This is from this book here. I've come across this on Intellectual Impostures before. This is wonderful. I'll say a few things about this actually. This is from a few years ago now, when particularly the French kind of intellectual left, as it were getting a little bit fast and loose with science, talking about it as simply a narrative, a construct, a way of viewing the world, rather than a way of finding objective truth. In fact, the idea of objective truth was completely rejected anyway. To the extent that, to give you one absolutely genuine quote, Einstein's E = mc squared was rejected as being sexist. Because it privileged those things that moved faster. Absolutely true. So in response to that, a physicist, Alan Sokal, wrote a parody, essentially, a postmodernist critique of quantum mechanics. And he sent it off to one of the magazines, a social text, where it was published. Now, within a week, of course, he revealed that this was a complete hoax. He'd made the whole thing up. And they then kicked off a huge storm, which is written up in this book here. It's well worth a read, actually. Some of the things that are being said are, well, frightening if they're true, but hilarious. So I'll, again, leave that around and kind of flip through later on. The key thing about all these qualifications, I think, is the personal interest side of it. It really engages the student. They pick a topic that they like. I've already talked about the black and white thinking. I had one student 3 years ago, and their topic was, or their question for their prospective dissertation was, should China be forced to stop building new power stations because of the effect on climate change? His thinking was that China should be forced, with military might if necessary, to stop the new power stations, perhaps knock down a few ones they've built, because of obviously the effect on the climate and so on. During the course of his research, he saw things he'd never seen before. For example, he got into the history of this, realised that, but for the geography of some of China's rivers, they would have had the Industrial Revolution before we did. Comfortably before we did, with a lot more coal as well, which they're now, of course, finding. He looked at how he felt it was unfair that the Western powers had got there first and were able to do their own thing with power stations, and then China's kind of left behind. He looked at the evidence behind climate change. And having gone through all of these things, his position, which was absolutely we should stop them, had changed to the extent of saying, actually, I don't even believe in man-made climate change anymore, and China can do what it wants. Now, we may not necessarily agree with his conclusions, but that's something about the breaking down of that black and white thinking. That is right, that is wrong. It makes him get into the evidence and produces a much more rounded student. And he was interested right from the start. And all of these projects engage the interest of the student, and then they really do run with it. As I said, an edge when looking at universities. Here's some quotes from the universities. about students who will be offering the extended projects. I'll let you have a quick look through that.
Do they tend to consider the extended project as valuable if it's in addition to 3 conventional A-levels, or can it substitute for one of them? Is it only the, say, exceptional types who've got 3 strong ones and then an extended project who are looked at favourably in this sort of context?
Sure, thank you. Clearly it depends on the course and on the student and the offer as originally given. It wouldn't replace an A-level, so the university still want the 3 A-levels or whatever. But it would be accepted instead of a 4th AS level. It's worth the same UCAS points. And the key thing, I think, is that you get your standard offer. For example, on Bristol's here, the 3 A's offer would be reduced to A's and B's if the extended project is there, because they see the student as having developed key skills that will be useful to them. So it's as an incentive. I've known that happen with a number of students. I've only known it happen so far with high offers like that. I don't think it replaces an E somewhere. I think they are looking for students who are top students already. All right. I want to get into a few of the ideas then. We've talked a bit already about science and what good science is. And this is the first bit where I'm going to ask you to kind of talk to each other. There'll be a few of these things during the course of the next half an hour or so. First question there, what is a scientific method? Part of the course, as we start off, is it's perspectives on science. So we start off by thinking about what science actually is. What is proper science? What is good science? What is a scientific approach to a problem? If I want to prove something, how do I do it scientifically? So, very simple question. What is the scientific method? I'm going to give 1 minute for this, for you in pairs, to come up with a definition of what is a scientific method. Anyone like to offer me an answer on that one? That's a very thrust upon you quite quickly. It's actually quite a big question when you start to think about it. But anyone like to give me a simple definition of a scientific process or the scientific process? Go on, someone's going to have to go because I'm not moving until we have.
Do you have a hypothesis and then test it?
I'm sorry?
Sorry, carry on, you carry on.
I was just going to say, yes, you start with your hypothesis, or null hypothesis, and then you would experiment and observe, record your observations, analyse your data, have a conclusion, and then produce your theory.
Adding to the theory yet? What we do with the theory once we've produced it? I guess, yes. I'm sure you test it first before you published it.
It needs to be more than that, doesn't it? Because it really only counts if you have found something which is not only repeatable by yourself, but can be repeated by other people. Things which have, a small group of researchers have quite sure they've seen cold fusion. Unless people all around the world can repeat that experiment under similar conditions, it can't really be accepted, right or wrong. It's not really science.
Absolutely, yeah. That cold fusion example I was about to give on that. Yes?
Only method which is accepted by the scientific community.
Interesting. Yes, it is self-perpetuating. This is actually one of the claims made by the intellectual left, that it's basically the scientific community is self-perpetuating, and only that which fits into its construct, its narrative, is accepted and therefore reinforced, and that therefore makes and so it goes on. And that's a genuine argument that some people give. So yeah, but the basic idea, there's facts out there, we observe something, we put a theory together, we test it, and then we make a prediction perhaps, and compare that to what we've started with, and if it needs changing, we change it and so on. But of course there are various sciences, and evolution, which deals with a lot of stuff that's historical, and cosmology, which deals with stuff that we can't go out there and test. So the method there's not one single method here. So we start from there, we then move on to think about what then is. So what questions do we ask to decide if something is scientific or not? A great example is homeopathy and homeopathic medicine. And you may have heard of the idea of dynamisation. The idea that you start with a herbal medicine and then you dilute it. And then you dilute it again and again and again and again until you're left with something which mathematically can't possibly even contain one molecule of the original potion, but which the teaching goes has been dynamised by the original potion and now contains a kind of memory of its healing properties, which will actually be stronger than the original potion that you had. Now, how do you test that? Well, there was one way of testing this. I'd like to just have these passed back, if I may. I just want to take one and pass it back there. And now, those. This happened in Belgium a few years ago. You may have come across it. And the idea was that these Belgian skeptics, who for years have been banging their heads against a brick wall, trying to convince the public not to go for these things, amazed as insurance companies would sell homeopathic insurance, despite there being no evidence for it at all. Eventually, they put on this massive public demonstration. And you can read for yourself. I'll give you a minute to look through this. Now, the point of this is not so much to discredit homeopathy, which that maybe deserve. The point of this is to get the students questioning what is good science. Now, most will see that homeopathic remedies are a bit daft. But what about the response? Was the response good science? Was what the Belgian skeptics did, has that proved anything? We're not going to answer that now. These are the kind of questions that you start to throw out from there, and from that, you will very easily get a good discussion going. Something like this is a starting point, so very visualizable, very visualizable, that's much better. We'll again, really engage the students' attention. Get them arguing, get them laughing, whatever, but they'll enjoy it. You may also have come across a column, Bad Science, and I'm struggling, I think it's in the Observer. Guardian is it, thank you. And if you collect those, they are always really worth looking at. They're the kind of columns that debunk this sort of thing. Scientific claims or pseudo-scientific claims that really don't hold up at all. You know, the kind of thing, your hair is 6% amino acids, so's our shampoo, therefore it's good for your hair. That kind of thing. I mean, your hair's 9% carbon, but I don't think coal dust is all that good for it. But that's a parallel explanation. So, excuse me. So these are all exercises that you could do in what is science. But it's not just about what is science, of course. We move on to the history. Now, we've heard a lot about Darwin. We'll hear some more about Darwin right now, and we've, I think this may have been mentioned or alluded to already. A scene from history. Darwin has been working on his theory for 20 years, natural selection. We know, of course, how important priority is for a scientist. The first person to announce their theory gets the fame that goes with it. And suddenly, a letter from Malaysia, his long-time correspondent Wallace, has come up with exactly the same theory independently. Not only has he done that, but he's written to Darwin with that theory, asking him to pass it on. Now, if you're Darwin, what do you do? And at this point, we throw it back to the students again. A, B, or C, what would you do? Well, what would you do? I don't know how honest we'd be here, that's the show of hands. But let's try it, shall we? Let's get this on camera as well. How many people here would go for A? Get rid of the letter. I mean, that no one would ever know. It could easily go missing. It's in Malaysia. It's a long time ago. There's no reliable postal service, is there? No one at all. We are very upright people. Put it to one side. Get in there first. After all, you know you've had this theory for 20 years. You know you should have priority. Wow. Very special company. Sorry?
I'm so sorry. They were actually published simultaneously, wasn't it?
They were.
But Darwin really got the priority because he got the big book and Wallace had only got a letter.
Absolutely right, yes. You've jumped to a conclusion there, but yes. Third one, forward it and lose priority. Well, that's right. The actual answer was just that. Darwin himself was actually quite ill at the time. He couldn't go in there, so he put both letters forward. They were both read, and as you say, in the end, it was Darwin who got the priority because of the vast amount of work he put into it. But again, there's the personal side of science. It's not just a collection of facts passed on. There is a personal side in there as well. And of course, you can also go into aspects of Darwin's own theology, his own spirituality. That's already been explored a couple of times this weekend. History is an important part of this. And it's very often, again as we've seen, misrepresented to make an ideological point. I was talking to Peter, who was just there, yesterday, about the Galileo episode. Now the current version is little short of pantomime. wonderful Galileo, the great scientist, comes up with this brave theory. The nasty church say, no, 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 you can't have that. Throw him in prison for the rest of his life. That's the way it's presented. That's the way students know. Now, I'm far from suggesting here the church is blameless on this. But there are certainly two sides to this. There's a lot of quite complex things feeding into it. And I'm not going to go into this because I've got an expert sat in front of me, and Peter just there can tell you all about that, and it's fascinating. So, but we'll wait till the drinks for that, I think.
I hesitate to put myself forward as an expert.
Well, compared to me, certainly. I'm going to mention you again later on, if you don't mind.
You're my agent.
Indeed, I am today. So, history of science does open up a lot of possibilities for exploring the human side of this. Philosophy. Many questions we can ask, and actually I'll do a lot more on this tomorrow when we're looking at philosophical and ethical debating in the classroom. But again, this is an exercise for you guys to engage in. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes on this one here. Sciences, not sciences at all, like pretending to be sciences, or pseudo-sciences, by which I mean something which uses scientific language, purports to be a scientific method, but really it is not at all. So I'd like you to get back into your 2s or 3s and decide which of those you think are clearly sciences, which are not, and which are pseudo. We're not going through all these one by one because we're here all day, obviously, but as quickly, ones that we'd have no problem at all classifying as sciences.
Physics.
Absolutely.
Biology.
Biology. Yeah. Cool. Medicine.
Ooh.
Or is it just another sort of engineering?
Oh. So you say that engineering is not a science?
Not in our sense. Despite the fact that physicists turned in the right side.
Defect, as it were. Astronomy, I would certainly classify astronomy as a science. Would there be dissension there?
Meteorology.
Meteorology. Weather prediction.
Does it work?
See, there are many things here that are clearly pure sciences, like the biology, like the physics. There are many here that are based on the application of pure science, where you have engineering and mathematics, and medicine and so on. Any of these would stand out as clear pseudosciences?
Phrenology.
Phrenology.
I would say astrology, but some people swear by it.
Astrology.
Depends who's talking about it, but yes, very often. I sometimes drive home and have Steve Wright in the afternoon on in the car, and the number of astrologers and dream interpreters and things that you have on, you just end up screaming at the radio, thinking, what on earth are you talking about? But they throw in those scientific sounding words. I assume everyone knows what phrenology is, the science of working out your future or your personality from bumps on your head. Have you ever read Terry Pratchett, the Discworld series? He makes reference to a wonderful science called retrophrenology, yes, whereby you're given a bump on the head with a hammer in order to affect your life. Memetics, study of memes and meme theory.
Pseudoscience.
I would certainly go pseudoscience. It's, I think it's been mentioned a couple of times already. Again, the idea there is that with a meme is kind of an ideological version of a gene. Rather than something physical on a piece of DNA, you have an idea which is transferred virus-like from person to person. Dawkins' idea, no evidence for it at all, as has been mentioned. No need for it in any kind of theory. And it is purely ideologically based, but it's talked of in the same way as genes and gene transfer. So I would personally say pseudoscience, others may not. Any others that jump out there as being problematic?
Aromatherapy.
Aromatherapy. Why? Why is that problematic?
Many people would say it makes claims that it can't then justify.
If it works, it is science.
Not necessarily, is it? Because the Romans had a lot of things that worked, but they just found out that they worked and had no idea, and they had no theory, no explanation as to why they worked. They just knew that the water channels had to be at least, half a degree or 1 degree or something, or the water stopped flowing. They had no hydraulics.
Sure. The point of the exercise, obviously, is partly about working out what these things actually are, but the main point is to think about what we mean by sciences. And what will tend to happen is, by the end of the session, the students are starting to say to you, what do you actually mean by science? Where do we draw our own definitions of this? And so you're developing the students' understanding of their terminology and their understanding of the world as you go through the exercises. And they love doing it as well. You get a lot of arguments about this. On the philosophy thing, a couple more things. This is a card game. There's a pack of cards around later on. We can try it. I tend to do this as an introduction to the scientific thinking and philosophy sections of the course. It's a card game. Basically, the idea is that someone, the rule maker, has a pack of cards, and then the people he's playing with have to go around the room, and each one turns over a card in turn. And the rule maker says, yes, it follows the rule, or no, it doesn't. But only he or she knows the rule. And the idea is the rest of the contestants then have to guess what the rule is. So here the rule is it has to be higher than the card below it, and then lower than the card below it. So that's lower, case of a 1, that's higher, oh that's higher again, doesn't count, now that's lower, that counts, that's higher, that's no, not lower, and you get the idea. And then the next person can have a different set of rules altogether. It's like the kind of party games that you may have played. You know, someone is sent out of the room, they come back and they can guess the object you're thinking about, and you have to work out how on earth they're communicating. Those sorts of things. It does teach skills of observation and investigation, asking the right questions. Once you've done a few of those games, people start to spot the new ones quite quickly. There's only so many ways you can do it. I'll have to demonstrate some over the wine tonight, by the way. So before we move on to that, one more thing as well. I found this a useful book. This is by Stephen Law. He's no fan of religion. I think it's obvious from reading the book. And it's endorsed by Philip Pullman, another hardly a champion of the course, author of his Dark Materials trilogy. It does have some very good stuff in it for promoting thinking. I find it a bit suspicious, having read through the stuff on religious ideas. He tends to lecture, and the rest of the stuff he tends to do some very good kind of Platonic dialogue type material, which is well worth working through. Again, that'll be here on the front, so I'll have a good look at it afterwards. Finally, then, we've done the history, done the philosophy, and the ethics of science. This is where the students tend to get most engaged and most argumentative. How should we live? What's right and what's wrong? And again, students will have very clear ideas of what is right and what is wrong. Normally, the things that affect them badly are wrong, and the things they want to do are right. And we then build up from that to looking at ethical frameworks. I was talking to, I think it was John earlier, talking about speed limits and who keeps the speed limits and who doesn't. And if not, why not? What other laws would you break? And so on. What framework are you using for ethics? It does promote very strong opinions, obviously. A surprising and worrying number of students are happily in favour of the death penalty, for example, euthanasia. And it does expose their inconsistencies if you are careful and clever with it. What you don't want, of course, to do is to embarrass somebody in a classroom. You want to bring out these ideas rather than push them down. But the right question at the right time, when they're comfortable, is a great way forward. Framework talks about, is it wrong to steal? Another snippet from the textbook. Is it wrong to steal? Everyone says yes. Why is it wrong to steal? Well, it's not yours, so what? And then you get into ideas of property. Does anyone really own anything? What if you are actually redistributing wealth? If the general trend of stealing is that stuff goes from richer people to smaller people, on average, isn't that socially quite a good thing? And so again, you break it down, you have to start thinking, well, students have to start thinking, well, actually, what am I basing my judgment of right and wrong? What is my framework for this? Another example, which I'm going to ask you to think about now. The shallow pond, you may have come across it again. The idea is this. A lecturer is walking to his, or a class teacher is walking to their lesson, and they notice a small child struggling in a pond. They know that if they stop to help the child, they'll be late for their lesson, they'll have to change their clothes, get all muddy, but if they don't stop, the child will die. They walk on, and the child dies. Next day, that same teacher gets a letter in the post, says, give £5 to this charity, and we will save the life of a child in Ethiopia. And he believes, quite rightly, correctly, believes the letter. If he sends his £5, a child will be saved. He doesn't send the £5, and sure enough, a child dies. Are those two the same situation? Is he equally culpable? Is he culpable at all? 1 minute. Again, we could be here for a long time debating all the ins and outs of that one, but we'd like to offer an opinion on that, or an observation.
Why did you say shallow?
Shallow.
It's just what the exercise is called in the book, no other reason than that.
No consequence of the shallow.
No, not at all, not at all. It's exactly how, there's no trick, exactly as presented. If he walks on, the child drowns. If he doesn't send £5, the child dies. And both are absolutely true.
So, was he drowned because the child was in the pond or something else? You didn't say the child drowned in the pond, so the child drowned.
There's no trick to this at all. There really isn't. The child is drowning in a pond and wasn't pulled out because he'll be late to his lecture or his class or whatever. He didn't send £5. Although he believed the leaflet, completely believed it, he didn't send the £5. The child dies. So, is he equally culpable in both situations? Any ideas?
Well, our answer here was that the second situation is unreal, whereas the first situation is real.
What do you mean by unreal?
Because you've postulated that money would sent to Africa would genuinely save a child's life. That is never true in reality.
But if he believes it to be true,
believes it to be
that's
true, yeah.
another matter, isn't it? If he believes it to be true, then you should
Yeah, you're right. And I think what you need to do with this kind of exercise is try and get rid of all those things that might question the premise. So you say, if he sends that £5, it will result in that child being fed. It will, or getting the TB jab or whatever. So you have to kind of lay that out there.
So he's chosen to deliberately not send the £5,
Yeah.
knowing that he would kill the child.
Know that the child would die if he didn't. Yeah, because in both cases he's not actually killing the child.
But from what you're saying is that in the second case, if he sent the £5, the child would live. And if he doesn't send the £5, the child would die. And he's chosen not to send the £5. So therefore he's responsible.
Is he?
Well, if he's made that decision...
No, I'm not answering it, I'm just throwing it out there. I'm being a teacher. What class? What do we think?
Because in the first case, it seemed to me that if the child in the water and he had the opportunity to save the child, he would buy it.
Yeah.
It seems to me that he's responsible.
He is the only person
for the
that
death
saves the child.
Right, thank you.
Exactly. Is it raising the issue that he could get 100,000 letters like that? And, well, it's
There's
just
100,000 other people.
yeah.
Indeed. And these are the kind of issues, I'm not going to get an answer here, obviously, these are the kind of things that will be brought up by that discussion. You can set these kind of things up yourself, it's quite easy to do. But it's a great promoter of discussion, and that's the point there. Okay, right, my time is nearly up, so I'm going to move on from this. Oh yes, the would you steal a handbag one. You've seen those adverts, haven't you? That's another great starting point, stuff on telly. Apparently kids watch a lot of telly. And this advert, if you haven't seen it, is, you wouldn't steal a handbag, you wouldn't steal a car, you wouldn't steal this, that, and the other. So, why would you illegally copy some music off the internet? So, it's the same thing. I once heard someone reply to that saying, no, I wouldn't steal a handbag, but if they had a handbag that could reproduce itself many, many times and then be returned to its original owner. Anyway, you get the idea again. So, like with a shallow pond, is an equivalent situation. Is copying something illegally the same as actually stealing it? Do you keep the property, and so on? Alright, this was actually billed as on the perspectives of science, and so in terms of a trade description and everything else, I'm going to whiz through the rest of this, which is just a few ideas about, if you wanted to do this course, what do you do? Well, several ways of doing it. That's more a curriculum issue. When can you fit it in? I teach it after school over a year. An hour or two a week with some individual tutorials. Half of that is teaching the skills, and then we get onto the actual project work itself. But there are various different ways of doing it. And you fit it in around the students that you've got, really. The project itself, when it's sent off to the moderator, must contain those things: the final outcome, the dissertation they've done on the question of their choice, a proposal form where they explain what they want to do, why they want to do it, what kind of information they'll need to get, what possible problems they're going to come across in terms of research and timing. An activity log, very important. Right from the start, the students are recording everything they do as they build up their project. And then finally, they will, like I'm doing now, present to their peers a summary, a précis of what they've done, and then they'll answer questions from them. And the more aware students tend to plant questions in the audience for that bit. The project proposal is, well, as I've said, in fact. The better ones are those, clearly focused, discussed with their teacher, realistic. I've seen proposals come across my desk as a moderator, things like, why does the CIA suppress evidence of alien invasion in the Mayan civilization? That kind of really sort of wacky out there stuff. I had one that started off as a project on using genetics to make humans into superhumans, and by the end of it they had X-ray vision and they were flying like Superman and stuff like that. And the teacher clearly had not really supervised that properly. They hadn't, although you want your students to really go in the direction they want to go, to explore the ideas themselves, as an assessor, as a teacher, you do need to sometimes just gently redirect them. And that is an important part of this. They haven't got all the skills when they start to do this properly. Here, personal perspectives. Some of the best ones I've seen, things like on one on eugenics from a girl whose whose brother had Down syndrome. A real great personal rationale, really engaged with that topic. Some sample questions. Science religion aspect does get done quite a lot. I've seen some great ones on religion should be banned in schools altogether. I've seen some great ones on Richard Dawkins is harming the public's perception of science. But it's all about the way they argue, the way they research, the way they present. I've seen a very interesting one on, is it ethical to use the results of Nazi experiments on humans? Fascinating question. And the general structure is that it's a dissertation structure, abstract, obviously written last when the students come to do it, research review, synthesized review, discussions, conclusions, bibliographies, the usual kind of structure. But again, it's very useful when the students are moving on to higher education. They have that skill, they have that knowledge. We can skip through that. The dissertation itself, balance of argument, what they're looking for. A good perspectives on science dissertation is not what are the views on this. It's not a fence-sitting exercise. In fact, we say to our students, we want to know an opinion on something. We want a question that has effectively a yes or no answer. We want you to convince me of what you think and why you think it. This should be banned. This should be allowed. The limit for this should be so many weeks. Here's why. Here's the counter-arguments, but I reject them thus. So it's proper, it's balanced arguments and counter-arguments, but it's with a conclusion. Because in too many subjects, it's just, oh, tell me what both sides think. Finishes with a presentation, as I say, like this one here. The best one I saw was a student who was doing their dissertation on, was Myra Hindley genetically predisposed to murder? And subtitle, if so, should she be in prison? Her conclusion was yes, actually. But the presentation, rather than being a kind of death by PowerPoint like mine, was an old advert from a car manufacturer. I think it was Honda, and you may remember it. They'd taken the car apart and they'd built this amazing Heath Robinson machine where the windscreen went up and it knocks the steering wheel over, which moves something else, and so on. And of course the idea was determinism. So while she explained her ideas, in the background was this wonderful analogy of determinism just playing. And her talk was timed perfectly, and it finished as the last thing fell over. Wonderful. She went to Cambridge. She was an outstanding student. Most are, I have to say, more like this kind of thing. They just read off that, and we all read off that and get very, very bored. Right, I'm going to finish there then. Resources, as I say, please do feel free to have a look at the textbook. It belongs to the schools, so please don't nick it. These belong to me, so please don't nick them. And that one there. I'll leave them on the front here. Supporting books and magazines, plenty of websites, obviously Scientific American, some of the history-based magazines. I know Dawkins has had a bit of a bashing this week, and I think for some fairly good reasons, but I will say this, when it comes to science writing, he's outstanding, in my opinion. Very clear, very focused. It's when he goes off piste that I think there are perhaps some issues. But I will happily recommend things like Devil's Chaplain and Selfish Gene, because there are sections of those books certainly which are very well written and very clear, and good examples of synthesised writing for students to learn from. Colleagues from other departments, when my head of department moved on, I co-presented this with a colleague from the history department who was able to do some really good work on things like the Holocaust. Did 6 million Jews get killed in the gas chambers? All the students said yes. The evidence said, well, actually, no, nowhere near that amount. And again, it's very, very complex. Peter, I mentioned your name there. And I'm going to finish on this by handing over. Would you like to, sorry, I'm on the spot here, just for a minute or so, tell us what you do and how it's useful to us.
Well, what I'm going to do immediately is engage David as my agent. What I do, and why I've come along this weekend, because I saw the advert in Education and Science and thought it would be useful in terms of what I might learn, but also the contacts I might make. I run my own theatre and education company. It's a one-man company, and I go into schools. I'm normally invited by science departments. I do Einstein, I do Darwin, I do Galileo, and I am in character all day in the school with as many students as school wishes me to see, in classes and also interacting on corridors and at lunchtime, and so there's lots of opportunity for informal question and answer. And I don't go in to teach. I go in to be that character, to present how that character worked, how that character thought as best I can. And the students can question me to their heart's content, whether they agree or not, or they can raise any issue at all. It's not just science. From Easter, I'm actually going in as Joseph Stalin for history departments as well. So I do have some promotional material if David hasn't done enough to promote what I do, and I'm quite happy to leave some on the chairs as you come in, should you. Just as by way of testimonial, I was around the country for 2 weeks over Science Week, and only 2 of the schools in those 2 weeks I actually knew. The rest had re-engaged me from previous visits, so I hope that's a testimonial in itself. Thank you, David.
I'll just finish off with
10%?
Amazing timing, and I mean amazing timing. John Taylor, who I mentioned earlier, has this second texted me to confirm that yes, this is still on sale. Best way to get it is through Amazon. There we are. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, I think if we have any questions and discussion, this is a good time to kick off on that. Anybody use these materials and would like to give some feedback? I'm sure that'd be interesting as well. Certainly. Yeah.
Do you have difficulty assessing these in terms of dealing with content you may be unfamiliar with yourself? You said coming down with an opinion about a particular thing. What if a balanced view is where there's no particularly strong opinion if you're factually well versed with that topic, say?
Yes, thank you. I think the biggest problem I have is when I am an expert in that subject more than when I'm not. As a moderator, I get lots of extended projects on ideas of history, of English literature that I'm not really qualified to judge. And there what I'm doing is I'm using the marking grid to see have they justified their points of view, have they used their research well, can I follow their research trail, that sort of thing. The good teachers make sure the students choose questions that they can argue properly as well. The biggest issue I've had is where I get a extended project in, a perspectives project in on some aspect of physics, which I know very well indeed, and I can spot flaws in their argument that I know another assessor might not. And that's where it becomes a bit tricky. So I have to kind of not suspend my opinion on that, but I have to kind of qualify it a little bit and ask the questions of have they done their research well. There may be some misunderstandings there that might lose them a mark or two, but in essence, have they done a research trail I can follow? Have they analysed it, critiqued their sources? Have they provided counter arguments and dealt with them effectively? So it's those sorts of skills we're looking at more than their final conclusion.
Just my interest in performance. When you say performance, could be one of the large 24 of the marks, was it?
Yes.
Could that be a performance if they'd written a play, for example, and had other people acted for them? It wouldn't have to be their own presentation.
Yes, in that case, you'd probably call it an artefact, and it would be the scripts and the lighting and the bits around it, that kind of thing. But certainly, yeah. What you can do actually is have students work. I've seen it. Students working in groups on a play. Some are doing the acting, some are scripting it, some are stage managing, and so on. All of them would need to have a common focus. So it couldn't just be we're going to put on a play. It would be a play to illustrate aspects of, I don't know, the struggle to be an Islamic woman in Britain today, that kind of thing. And yeah, different people then would do different things. All we would ask as moderators is that every student produces an independent piece of work with their own activity logs, their own proposals, their own research, and so on and so forth. If there's too much that's shared, that the marks start to come right down. It has to be clearly individual, even though they're doing the same thing. Another example of that was a couple of students who did work on creating a children's book on, I think it was on racism or something for primary school. And they realised very quickly it wasn't simply just writing a book with short words. There's a whole style to writing a good children's book, and one became the illustrator and one became the writer. And so they had different jobs. They could clearly share the research, but they'd write it up themselves.
We had situations where the students chose a very contentious issue and was not taking guidance from the teachers involved. As a consequence, in their presentations have upset a large number of people, or upset any of the students.
Interesting. No, I've not come across that as a short answer. Largely because, obviously as a teacher, my group kind of works together and we do share ideas. And one of the activities we do about a little way into the discussion writing is we get them to sit in pairs and they discuss it with each other. And what they do is one will sit down, give a quick presentation verbally of their arguments, and the other person has the brief of questioning to death every point they make. And then, of course, they change sides and have another go as well. So we tend to pick up on that quite quickly. And as an assessor, of course, I would be sensitive to someone who's saying, let's, I don't know, insert your own atrocious idea there. But yeah, of course, you'll be monitoring that. I've not come across it from other schools either, I have to say, as a moderator. So I'm hoping that all teachers are doing their jobs.
Any other questions from anybody, or comments, suggestions, further course development?
I was just going to
Yes.
share with us.
Yeah, please.
Shallow economy that you talked about. There's the Philosopher's Magazine online. They've got a website with lots of philosophy and ethics games, and that's one of the examples they use. Kids love it. I'll start the ethics course with them playing that and then talking to each other in a virtual learning environment. It's great. So, Philosopher's Magazine website's one of the
I'm completely looking at here, but actually there's lots of project hints, research hints, these little boxes on the side all the way through, giving links to, in many cases, those sorts of websites. A particular Wikipedia site there, Institute for Creation Research is a flavour. There's Mr. Dawkins again, look. So again, yeah, lots of things like that referenced in here.
I mean, also, if people did have any other particular suggestions about things they found really work well on this kind of material, even if it's not these materials, that's quite interesting to know, I think, for other people. So.
Yeah. Well, I will say now, tomorrow is going to be a lot more of trying things out, suggested activities. Again, it's not going to be intellectually too taxing, but hopefully it's going to be a bit of fun and we'll give you some ideas. I think if tomorrow's session, if there are other ideas, things that you've tried that you want to share, I'll be really happy to receive that. There will be a time I'm giving over to that kind of sharing, so if you keep quiet, it's going to be a rather short session. I shouldn't say that, should I? I'll fill it and it'll be done. Thank you.
Okay, well, let's thank David very much. I found that fascinating, so thank you.